Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Extra Time presented by In 90 Minutes Podcast. Tonight I have David G with me. Luke was unable to make it last night. So thank you for being here, David. How you doing today?
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to see you, John. Good to see everybody out there watching this later. Always good to chat some more Orlando City.
Definitely, definitely. Like always, we'll just jump right into it. Basically, the first topic is the, in my opinion, embarrassing banner that some Orlando City supporters had. I don't want to say it was all the supporter groups together because I would have imagined if it was, it would have been bigger. But they on the mat at the match on Wednesday, they put a sign, a banner, and it said "Stop exploiting loyalty." And for those watching it, we have it on there. For those that aren't watching, it's all over um, social media, people talking about it and everything. In my opinion, before we signed Griezmann, they definitely had a point. But when you're paying the amount of money that we'll be paying him, I mean, we're setting a franchise record for his salary by far, where he's getting a lot more than anybody else. Because I'm pretty sure Kaká was the highest, and he was only at estimated with bonuses 7 million, 7 to 8 million. So we're on nearly 50% more, depending on who you talk to, 50% more than what Kaká was getting paid. Obviously, inflation, everything happens, but from what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, that $11 million figure is his base salary. That doesn't include any bonuses or anything like that.
Yeah, it doesn't, and there's going to be likeness deals and all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure Kaká got as well
Yeah.
with some of the stuff that he got. But yeah, to just kind of tee this subject off, obviously I saw it pop off a little bit as well. For those that don't know, I am one of the moderators on the Orlando City subreddit. So this was a post that came up like mid-game, which was kind of funny because normally people are more plugged into the game than they are about this kind of stuff. I will say I was at the game. I saw when this banner came out. It did not stay out very long. I imagine that these people were told to put it away pretty quickly. I imagine that's probably why it wasn't out for very long. I'm not. I agree with you, John, to a degree that pre Griezmann they kind of had a point. I still don't think they really had a great point, and this is why. Um, we spent almost $10 million on U22s. I still think the common MLS fan doesn't understand that that's money that comes straight out of the owner's pocket because you don't see that hit your books. Like, there's a lot of nuance that I think fans don't understand, and I, for one, don't expect fans to understand these nuances. MLS roster rules are ridiculous. They're crazy. For sickos like me who study the roster rules, it's just too much information, right? But really, to make a long story short, this money might not matter to the team in terms of salary cap and in terms of how they're going to affect the roster, but it matters to the owners. The owners pay that money straight out of their pocket. So that was almost $10 million that they paid out of their pocket in order to make this work. Oscar Pareja, when they parted mutually, there was money exchanged there to basically say to Oscar Pareja, "That's fine, you can go." And they came to some kind of settlement. I don't know what that figure is. I've asked sources. Nobody's really said, but I imagine he got a figure of some sort to go away. So on those moves alone, because don't forget, a lot of the fan base was asking for Oscar Pareja to go, and they made it happen eventually, right? Whether it was mutual or not mutual, we can sit here and play the semantics game all we want. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
He
Exactly.
got some money, right? That alone puts you over $10 million, right, John? Between those two. Then
Yeah.
on top of it, like you said, Ricardo does all the courting visits, which those trips came out of the owner's pocket. And again, I'm not trying to nickel and dime, but I'm trying to prove a point here. Those trips came out of the ownership's pocket. All the scouting that went into what we've been doing in Europe over the past 6 months, because we've been heavy scouting Griezmann, as well as Dusan Stojinovic and a couple of other targets that I'm not aware of, but I know the team was looking at other targets in Europe. Those that came all out of the ownership's pocket to go do that. That didn't come out of anybody else's pocket, right? And then, to your point, we closed Griezmann. who's going to get his annual salary of around $11 million, and then you're going to see bonuses and all this other stuff tacked on. So that's another, what, you're probably in the 22 range at that point after that's all said and done.
Everything goes well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I get it. Like, I understand that this is the first time we've, as a fan base, we really felt like sort of a loser, right? For lack of a better term. We feel pretty down on this team going into the season. A lot of people do, right? The problem is, I don't think you can say after all of that we're being exploited. Like, I understand the argument at the end of the year when the team did tone-deaf things like selling you a $70 t-shirt and like $40 scarves and all the other junk they sold us when we didn't really make the playoffs. That I understand. That's exploitation. We can kind of push back at the club by not using our wallet, right? By you not spending the money on that stuff, the club goes, oh crap, we're not going to make any money on this. We just ate it, right? Or the shirt that came out earlier this year that had the lion with the extra, like, part of his paw or whatever, and it looked like it was AI generated, and the club had to put out a making video to try to prove to people that it was, handmade or whatever. You shouldn't have to do that, right? That's the club exploiting you in certain ways, right? A lot of people, actually, funnily enough, because I believe this is on the Charlotte night, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
That night, the club actually gave you cheaper food and cheaper drink, and I think we proved, those of us that were there, because it wasn't a full house, obviously, I think we proved, hey, we'll buy more if you give us reasonable, dollars amounts for beers and for pretzels and for everything else that we're going to buy, right? Like, I finally bought a drink for once, and I never buy drinks at the stadium, because I never want to spend that much money. So I get it. Like, I understand people, it's a rough feeling this season, but I don't think you can full out say you're being exploited, especially with everything that's been going on. What I will say is you were maybe deceived. I'll give you that. You were definitely deceived to start the season. I feel a little deceived. I know John and I personally have talked about this, about, we've talked, and on this show and other shows, we've all talked about maybe not the right verbiage being used to start the season, with people like Ricardo and other folks that talked about this being a reload and not a rebuild. And we all don't agree with that, obviously, at this point. And I don't even think the club would agree with that sentiment at this point. But I don't know that being exploited is necessarily the word I would go with.
Yeah, and I mean, even to add on to that, we had to pay money to get rid of Muriel. We paid him, pretty close to, from what I've heard, $2 million to not play for us. And then people are like, well, we got rid of Schlegel, we didn't sign Araujo. Freeman was going to go no matter what. He did us a favor. We got rid of Dagger Dan, we got rid of Gillespie, yada, and which we've talked about on the show before. You and I think, specifically talked about getting rid of those guys before. But, the MLS roster rules are stupid. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an absolute expert on it. I have a grasp of what they are. And, to keep it simple, we could never have signed a player like Griezmann if we kept Araujo. Period. That one player. We couldn't have signed we couldn't have signed, it would have been difficult to sign. I know they're under U22 statuses and everything, but it would have been extremely hard financially, budget-wise, to sign the 3 Brazilians if we would have kept Schlegel for what Schlegel was asking. Because they didn't want to keep Schlegel this year and him not re-sign, and then we lose him on a free. And then Gillespie
It would have been a conversation between, and again, fans can have this conversation, that's fine, but it would have been a conversation between Schlegel or Janssen. You weren't going to get both. That was the choice that was on the table in order to make that work. And obviously, as people have seen, Janssen has come in and stabilized a back line that was not stable and not organized. Would Schlegel have done the same thing? I don't know that he would have, to be honest with you. He doesn't. I don't think he has that level of leadership, right? I don't think he has that level of organization. That's the mind that you get from Janssen. Even if his body starts to go a little bit, and we've seen moments this season where he clearly doesn't seem like he's at the level he was before. the mind is where you have it at, and I don't know that Schlegel ever had that. I just don't think he's the madman in the box, right? We talk about it all the time, right? He's madman Schlegel. He's just going to run around, he's going to make mistakes, he's going to do dumb stuff, but he's also going to come up with some pretty gnarly stuff as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's always a sentiment between supporters groups all over the world, ultras groups, firms, whatever you want to call them, all over the world, between ownership and themselves, saying that they're exploited. But you're the one that pays to go to the games, and it even says, I'm pretty sure, one of the disclaimers, when you purchase your ticket or your season tickets, you may be used for promotional material. And I know that's one thing that's always been a place of contention between all over the world, period.
Yeah.
For that, and it's just, for them to do it, I find it ironic for them to do it that night, and then the team come out and put on a good performance like they did was one of the biggest ironies I've ever seen. But I mean, at this time, I don't get it. I don't. If I was saying, a couple months ago that if we're not going to sign somebody, then they do need to sell the team. Well, guess what? They signed somebody.
Well, and here's another argument that bothers me a little bit, and this came up. I don't know how often, John, you listen to Den After Dark, but this came up in Den After Dark after the DC match, and I don't normally speak in there. I normally just listen because now I have a platform, and I know some other people in there don't, so I like to give them an opportunity to kind of say their piece. But this one I couldn't sit out, and shout out to a good friend of mine and Mike Spillane, who runs that for the Lions Den guys, but. The argument that didn't make sense that some people had in there was Ricardo failed because he couldn't get Griezmann now instead of in the summer. That's not a failure to me. The player at the end of the day gets the choice of whether they come now or not. Now, the club could have easily, and by that I mean mostly Ricardo, could have made the decision that, no, we don't want to wait for Griezmann. We're going to go get somebody else in the summer. And they could have made that choice. But then you guys would have skewered the guy for not getting Griezmann now and then waiting until the summer to get somebody else. So what did I say throughout the process when this thing was starting to go a little bit south and they got to the Copa del Rey final and they moved on in the Champions League? I said to everybody, hold on. They're going to go back and they're going to ask him to come in the summer, but they're going to ask him to make some concessions when he comes in the summer. And from what I understand, contractually, that first year, he will be making a little bit of concessions. I don't know how much money he's going to end up giving in terms of a concession back for that first half season, but he's going to give something back because he's only going to be here for half a season. Yeah. To me, that's not a failure. That's the front office going back to it and saying, okay, this guy who really holds all the cards because he's a world-class player is saying, yeah, I'll come, but I can't come now. I can't let these people down, especially if that's the kind of attitude and culture you want to build at Orlando City. You can't go and then piss that guy off and then say, oh, well, he doesn't want to do it, whatever, we're going to move on to somebody else. And again, there's not a lot of players out there like an Antoine Griezmann, right? So who else were you going to go to? So that argument to me holds no water. I think it's ridiculous. I think you should be glad enough that Ricardo could close this, because there's been other GMs in the league that have not closed Griezmann. That was the ongoing joke in MLS circles, is that, oh, here's Griezmann again. He says he's going to come to MLS, but he's not going to come. We've seen this before with, LAFC and all the big teams, Inter Miami and all these other ones that have tried to call him before. He can't close him. Well, guys, Ricardo closed him. Whether you want to believe that or not, and he said in his interview with Miguel Gallardo, it's when he came to his house and sat in his house for, 8 hours, 7 hours, whatever the heck it was. Yep. And sat in his house, in his living room and in his kitchen and said, hey, here's the whole project. This is what we want you to be a part of. How many CSOs would have gone and done that and pitched it in the way that he pitched it? I don't know that there's many in this league that would have pulled that off.
Exactly.
So, that's another argument that I can't stand. And I think it's another thing where it's like, guys, we're not used to needing to be patient, right? This fan base, again, I'm part of it, so I say this lovingly. We want the instant gratification, right? We want the wins now. We want this now. We want a new manager now. We want the DPs to hit the field now. Sometimes you can't do that. You got to wait. And thankfully, because the window is switching next year, it should help us out with moves like this, because these guys will want to come in the summer, which will be obviously preseason for us, which would be great. But unfortunately, right now, it's midway through our season. The one thing we can be grateful for, and I know John has banged on this a lot in the Rain show, is we have more games on the back half than the front half, and by a decent amount. so we can take advantage of what we have in the back half as long as we get to a certain number in the front half. So we got to think about it that way.
I mean, right now we're, 3 points away from getting to that number, that magic number I said in the first half? I mean, it's basically 2/3 of the season is left after the break. I think we're a game short of 2/3, if I recall correctly, without looking at it. So, I mean, there's still a lot of soccer to be played after the break. It's a perfect
and winnable games going into the break, I would argue too, right?
Yeah.
Miami's going to be tough, no doubt about that. But then after that, winnable games for this club, so it's possible for sure.
Yeah. I mean, 100. I mean, we talked about it on the show. The last 2 weeks about how hard our schedule's been the first 2 months, and it's like as we get closer to the break, we end with literally three of the 4 bottom teams, and we're the 4th. We end with Montreal, and then Cincinnati, who's up there a little bit. I think they're 10th right now. But
they're pretty back and forth this year.
Yeah, we end with after we play Miami, we end with Montreal, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and then Cincinnati on May 23rd. No reason we can't go out and get a win against Philadelphia and Atlanta at home, and at least get a draw against Montreal and Cincinnati. Because, I mean, it's just, and then you got that big, literally 2-month break. It's a day short from being a full 8 weeks, May 23rd to July 22nd. That, in my opinion, and this will kind of be where I would really question Ricardo, even though I think Perelman's done a good job, is if we don't bring somebody in over the break. There's certain people out there that will remain nameless just for that sake, that say Perelman's going to be with the club for the foreseeable future. I have a hard time believing that, but I will very much question Ricardo and the ownership's intention if you're bringing Griezmann in. I've heard that they're supposed to be pretty aggressive in the summer transfer window and bringing all these new players in. Why wouldn't you bring a manager in with those players? And even if you're looking at this year as kind of a throwaway year, maybe sneak into the playoffs or sneak into the semifinal of the U.S. Open Cup. But if you're really just hoping for that semifinal in the U.S. Open Cup and trying to maybe sneak into the playoffs, and if you don't, kind of, you still get the players that are here already. They could still get the experience under a new manager. And if we don't do that, I don't see why what happened back in, March happened with Poppy,
Yeah, I think, John, the other thing too, and we've talked about this a lot across the sort of the Orlando City discussion, is I don't think you go to Spain and sell Griezmann on this project and telling them, hey, if Oscar goes, don't worry. We got this guy who's right behind him who's going to be even better. I just don't think that's the way you sold it, if that makes sense. I think you sold it as in hey, we think this coach is going to be with us, but if he's not, here's our grand plan of who we want to look at and who we're going to kick the tires on and all that kind of stuff. I truly believe that we're waiting because we want to see what shakes loose around the World Cup time, because some of those managers we've already seen it a little bit, right? Like Saudi Arabia gets rid of Renard right before the World Cup, which didn't make a ton of sense to a lot of people. You're going to see other managers like that get cut loose from teams. And one of the names that I think isn't being talked about enough, and it really depends on how the World Cup goes, is Jesse Marsch, right? If Canada does okay and doesn't do well enough, I could see his contract with Canada not being renewed, and he's a MLS winner, right? He's won things in MLS. He knows how to do it, and he's a good manager. So a lot of Orlando City fans would probably be thrilled to have him. He's not the biggest name in the world, but he's a quality coach who can come in, and he's known for using youth, which is something that this club will be happy with. But I think that's sort of what they're waiting for. But to your point, I would start to question him as well. I'm not a fan of Perelman. I think I'm more down on him than other people are, and I think it's more so that I think there are times where he's over his head, and instead of being honest and open with fans about, hey, I'm trying to learn this process, just bear with me, it's more of his defense mechanism is, let me argue with you. And he's had multiple opportunities where he's argued with reporters, which I think is unprofessional, honestly, because you're not in a moment to do that. And then number two, none of these reporters have said anything that's really that rude to you at all. They've asked you questions about your tactics. They've asked you questions about your substitutions and things like that. That's not off the table, man. You're the manager. You're supposed to answer those kind of questions. And honestly, after this game, and I caught your guys' show, but I'm curious if you want to go more into depth about it, but I was not a fan of his substitutions at all. I think the only substitution that made sense was Tyrese Spicer because he changed the game. Everybody else to me failed. And I don't even blame Wilder and Tahir Reed Brown all that much because I don't think it was their fault. They were put into a tough situation that this manager just couldn't handle, and that's inexperience. You just don't have the experience of when you're playing a match and you're 2-1 up, what substitutions do you need to make sure that you keep the game? And there wasn't a way, he couldn't figure it out. He didn't know how to keep the game. And now I'm hearing that because of the way that DC game ended, he's starting to think about other options now. And this isn't a time to rip up what you've already started to build and try something completely different. You're in an Open Cup match when this goes out today, right?
Yeah.
And then you're against Miami on the weekend. So this is not a time to throw out the rule book if that is what's happening, and I don't know that for sure. But the tactical stuff just isn't there at the main boss level. It just isn't for him.
Yeah, I mean, the one that did really, the biggest one that there's two, and I guess they're kind of tied for it, is why you bring Dorsey on for Taifi at half. That's one. And then two specifically is bringing in Cartagena. When I saw Cartagena coming in, I'm like, why are we bringing him in a high-pressure situation like this where the match is tied and
he's rusty.
He's
rusty. He hasn't played.
And keep possession, and it literally showed right off the bat the dude couldn't complete a pass more than 5 yards in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing, John, with that was I think the Taifi sub Taifi's had a lot of miles on his legs over these last couple of games. He's been asked to defend some really tough attackers. Yeah. I mean, honestly, a stretch of Guilherme and then Zaha is nutso. Like, the fact that this kid held his own like he did is impressive enough, right? And not even to mention, he arguably went up against Naples' best player in Farine, who's played in the top flight in Colombia, and he defended him for most of that match as well.
Yeah.
That might have been a let's save his legs and let's try to give Dorsey a little bit of a run out before the Open Cup match, against New England. But and I think you brought this up in the show, I'm not sure it's Dorsey's job anymore. I think you have to have an honest competition at this point, because I think Zach Taifi got better game after game, and now he continues to show that, like, he's got an extra punch and extra heart that I don't know if Dorsey has. And that's just because he isn't from the academy. Dorsey's great going forward. You can't argue that, right? He sets up the goal for Ellis. He's the one that heads it back post, that gets it back to Ellis, who, makes that great goal or whatever it is. But then besides that, he was invisible or a nuisance or a liability at the defensive end. And that's a problem, because, like, you should be defender first at that point. And then to really compound issues altogether, right? When you bring Justin Ellis off, you changed the complete formation, which made no sense, because the combination of Ellis and Spicer was putting too much pressure on DC, and they weren't able to get the balls in certain spaces. But then when you took Ellis off and you moved Spicer more centrally, you allowed DC to invite more pressure, and then you got burnt over it.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but it's not hard for any tactician to see that Spicer was eating their lunch on the left-hand side. Continue to let him eat their lunch on the left-hand side. Spicer might have been able to grab another one if Orlando City could even, put together a couple of minutes of possession. I understand you need to sub out Otavio because he's on a yellow, and it was a stupid tackle, and I talked about that on LPO this week. But the kid was great besides that, and the player you put in that situation, if you want to get him off, is Colin Gusky. That's a moment for Colin Gusky to step in and be able to defend and hold the game down. Period. Like, I just don't. It's almost like a guy who says he has a very good feeling and a very good handle over the youth because he was coaching OCB for as long as he was, didn't seem to really understand what he had in terms of kids on the bench, and that confuses me. I don't get
Yeah,
that
because
at all.
especially in the moment that he brought in Cartagena, it's not like DC was absolutely just battering our goal.
Yeah.
You bring in Cartagena, even when Cartagena's match fit, and starting or whatever, if it's you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You don't bring a player like Cartagena in to try to maintain possession and potentially go for the win. You bring him in because your defense is getting battered. And that just wasn't happening on Saturday to the extent that it needed to be, basically a sixth defender, because that's what Cartagena was, a sixth defender on the pitch. It needed to be Colin Gusky, who can have that calm presence in the middle, get the ball, in time when we're getting pressed, and break those lines and get Spicer running out wide. And we just didn't have that. And that's that's the Cartagena one just baffles me. It just does. Like I don't understand how, and I know pressure does a lot to people, but how you can be have the experience of coaching, different levels in South America than OCB, and you're on your, what is it, his 7th game now with a DC game, 6th game, whatever it was, coaching, and you go and you have such a good performance where you basically pulled every right string on Wednesday, and then you come into Saturday and you basically pull every wrong string.
Yeah.
And I don't, you look at who we had on the bench. We had Gusky, we had Ryan, we had Sarajan, and we had Nolan Miller on the bench that we could have used.
Well, and that's the thing. If you really wanted to pack 6 in the back, right, something like that, you could have easily put Nolan Miller on and said, hey, I want 4 center backs clogging up the box. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out. I don't really need the wing backs to do much. So Tahir just go a little bit farther ahead of them, but really just play in that sort of left half space. I can have Dorsey play in the right half space, and we're a solid block of 6. I can have Gusky and Brian Ojeda right in front of them. That's a solid block of 8. DC's not getting through that. You're not working through a solid block of 8. And then you still have Spicer and Tincho, who are ready to break out if you need them to go break out and possibly get another one. But you just didn't do that. You put the wrong... And again, I'm a Wilder Cartagena fan. I love Wilder Cartagena.
Yeah.
I think he's, arguably... I think you can make the argument that he's one of the best defensive midfielders this club will have by the time his time is up with Orlando City. And that's saying a lot, because we've had a lot of good defensive midfielders, no doubt, right? But this guy has been the most consistent. But every fan knew as soon as he came on, he was going to be rusty. Everybody knew it. He hasn't played a game since the first week. Before that, he didn't play a single game in the entire season. This guy has not played full-paced games at all. And preseason doesn't count, man. They're subbing dudes in left and right. They're playing all kinds of different formations. You're not under a true test, right? Unless you're playing in these Coachella tournaments or whatever the heck else they're doing out west or whatever. That's a little bit more simulated to real games, but he didn't get that, right? That we didn't get that benefit this year. And so to me, it just didn't make sense. Now, if we're up by 2 goals at that point, if we're up by 3 goals at that point against DC, fine. Put Cartagena in. If a goal slips in, you talk to him about it. You make sure he's more structured and he's fine. But you don't put him in a situation where you only have a 1-goal lead and you're hoping that he can hold it down just because of what his past has shown you. It just doesn't make a ton of sense.
Cartagena was brought in when it was tied, so it was even worse.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, even worse then. Yeah, even worse of a situation than at that point, which just didn't make sense. So it's just, again, I don't want to bash on Perlman. He seems like a nice enough guy. He seems like a good attacking assistant coach and all that kind of stuff. I just don't think he's ready for this level. And I think to go back to the original conversation, I think it's a mistake if the front office and ownership say, you know what, Perlman did enough. Let's give him the keys. We'll sign him to a permanent coaching deal. We'll see what he can do when he has Griezmann and all these other pieces we're going to get him in the offseason. I don't think that's the right play. I just don't think you've seen enough from him tactically to say this is it. Like, this is the guy. Like, I think the Montreal was the you got rid of your coach bounce. I think the one against Charlotte was Charlotte's trap game. We came in here, we played all the kids, they had all the energy in the world. They were at home. The fans that were there did make it a great environment. There wasn't a lot of us, but there were fans there nonetheless. We made it a good environment. You know, it was what it was. It was a great game for them. But besides those games, he hasn't really shown us much. I'm not giving him Naples. There's no reason why we should have only squeaked by 1-0. Honestly, it all had to do with the Spicer missile in the corner. Without Spicer's goal, I don't know that this team would have made another chance, to be honest with you. So there's just not enough there for me. And so, again, I know we're going to get into like what potentially this team could look like in the summer when we're going through all that. I don't know how you feel about it, but Crépeau's got to be reevaluated to me. I think that's another player that, and listen, maybe we made promises to him pre-World Cup and said, hey, we'll play you as much as we can, you know, so you can get ready for Canada. But I would say if we made that promise post-World Cup, you make it a fair competition, because I'm not convinced right now that he is number one untouchable at this point.
Exactly. I mean, especially, to me, the performance, and yes, it's against a lesser club, but there's still shots that Otero put against Naples. To me, that almost should have played him into a competition at least. You know, because do I think that we get out of that 1-0 with Crépeau in there? Absolutely not. I mean, the first goal that DC scored on Saturday, yes, Janssen should have stepped up. But there's just times where he just looks completely lost. And there's times that he looks brilliant with his positioning. And then there's other times where just as good as he looks even on the opposite end of the spectrum bad. And that first goal the first goal DC scored was exactly that. I mean, he looked like he thought he had his left post covered, and it wasn't even close. The way he dove at that was the way a keeper dives, just to show that it's close, but he thinks it's going, he thinks it's well wide, and it obviously wasn't.
Right.
We talked about it off the air once. The shot again, to me, the most excusable goal of the year is the one against Nashville. How, as a keeper, you let that sneak in, where there's minimal.
And it changed the game, John.
Yeah.
Because they scored so early, it just gave them that much confidence.
Mm-hmm. Where the biggest thing with keepers, for those that don't know, that why some long shots, or especially shots that are in the 18 to like 22 yard range, sneak in and the keeper just doesn't move, is because of the traffic between him and the ball. The one with Nashville, minimal traffic. There was one defender between him and the ball at that time. The one Saturday, there was one between him and the ball. The Messi free kick that Messi scored when they played here, to me, those three are virtually inexcusable for him to go in, because that was not a good free kick by Messi. That was, to me, I will go to my grave saying this, a mishit cross by the Nashville player that he meant to poke under and just got a lot more of his foot than he did, and it reverse spun to the goal. And then the one Saturday, yes, as I said just a second ago, Janssen should have stepped up, but that's also one Janssen had the entire right side of the goal covered. If you're Crépeau, you can't get beat from where the ball just came from when the ball's that far from the net.
Well, and John, you know this obviously as, understanding goalkeeper mechanics and whatnot, but I think what the fan base is really confused about, because there's a lot of, and this came up in our show on LPO earlier this week about, the whole deal with Pedro Gallese and what happened and whatnot. And my co-host Luis knows a lot about that situation because he's Peruvian and he's plugged into that kind of media stuff. And I think what fans don't understand is Pedro Gallese was never maybe the best at his positioning, but he was very good reflexively, right? He's a reflexive goalkeeper. He's got quick reflexes. He can make up for mistakes that he had, and you saw that a lot, right? And a lot of the sort of highlight plays that Pedro Gallese would have, it's because he'd do these like ridiculous things. The one that always comes to mind for me is the Dom Dwyer strike in Atlanta, where Gallese has no business like reaching that ball, and somehow he does, right? Because he's got the reflexes to go out and reach it, right? We see the Statue of Liberty save that he does against Messi, even though it was called offsides. Those are what we're talking about. Crépeau's not a reflexive goalkeeper. He's a positioning keeper. When he's at his best, it's because his positioning is down to a T. And that's fine. There are different ways keepers play, and you pick your poison, right? The problem with that, though, is, especially with somebody like Janssen, who's a holdover, Janssen in his head, naturally, with playing like a guy like Pedro Galese for the last couple years, is going to think his goalkeeper can make certain reflexive saves, and he can't. Crépeau's not going to make those. However, to John's point, the first goal that gets scored against him is a positioning problem. He should have been positioned in the right spot to make that save. There's no reason for him to get beat near post there. It doesn't make any sense. But for like the other goals that end up happening that he can't reach, it's because he doesn't have the reflexes. But if you pivot to Javier Otero's problem is he doesn't position well sometimes, but then secondly, he punches too much. He has the Galese problem. He never catches the ball enough. It drives me up the frickin' wall. I can't stand it. But he does have similar reflexes to what Galese had, so he can go and make those saves that you don't normally see him making. It's very similar to how Tristan Himes is with OCB. He's a very reflexive goalkeeper, but he's been punished before on his positioning. And so I think we're getting to the point where I think this team, honestly, with the way their defense kind of defends, would prefer to have a reflexive goalkeeper over a positioning one, and Crépeau is never going to be a reflexive goalkeeper, especially at his age at this point. If he doesn't have it now, he's not going to have it. And so I think that's where, and I genuinely believe this, I think you need to have an open goalkeeper competition post-World Cup, and then I think for Open Cup against New England, I think you play Otero. I think he earned himself another start after the Naples match, and I think you play him, honestly.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, the other thing too is very rarely do you see it was ended up being called offside, but the double save that Otero had against Naples on his left side, that was, you do not see a guy that's 6'6" be able to move his limbs like he did. Which, also, and in my opinion, I would rather my goalie be an athletic 6'6", a tall guy, because then he covers more of the goal without moving. Sure. He's got 5 inches on Crépeau. That was one thing when Bendik was here that always killed Bendik, was his lack of size, lack of stature. Mm-hmm. And to me, if you got a guy, I mean, think about it. Galese was what, 6'2", I think?
I think so.
6'3", maybe. You get somebody that has maybe not as good as Galese was, but is close to a Galese level, or especially has a potential, because Otero's still only 23.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I thought, honestly, coming into the season, even after we got Crépeau, that Otero was going to be the starting keeper, because everything I saw.
I'm telling you, John, I think there was an agreement. I think there was something that was come up that was like signed of like, hey, I'm fighting for the Canada spot. I think if you go into it and like, let's say Dane St. Clair knew for sure he had the job and like it was locked and done and nothing and all that kind of stuff, I think then the club can say open competition, we see who comes out ahead, whatever. But I think because Crépeau still has an opportunity to be the number one, I think they said, we'll give you as many games as we can give you. And honestly, Dane St. Clair hasn't been much better for Miami, honestly, this year. So there might be an honest competition there. But I'm just saying this club long-term can't go into it. And I'm not saying they're going to address this in the summer. I don't think they address goalkeeper in the summer. But don't be surprised if maybe they address it prior to the sprint season. I wouldn't be shocked if they go into it and say, hey, we don't think Crépeau is it. We're maybe, and if they're not 100% convinced by Otero, they might go knocking and try to find another goalkeeper at that point.
No, absolutely. I mean, from what I saw with Otero, I mean, there's definitely last year, especially when, Otero would be playing with OCB, there was such a different level, in net with him in there. And that's nothing against, I forget his name now, Mercado. I thought Mercado was a great keeper for OCB. He literally just aged out of OCB. He was 26. But, still with it, when Otero would go in there was just a complete, you could tell he was above the level of OCB. I want to see what he does. I'd love it if we, after the World Cup, if the club opens that up and says, Otero, Crépeau, this is yours to win, go win it. And, from what we've seen on the pitch this year so far, outside of the New York game. That was an impossible situation for Otero to come into, being down a man and the team just being terrible. But then Crepeau gave up. How many did he give up against Nashville? 5?
Yeah,
Was
five,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
five, yeah.
And he was in there for LAFC as well. So, I mean, it's one of those, they're kind of tit for tat, if you will, in their performances this year from what we've seen, the limited we've seen from Otero. And I think if he comes out and he has if he has another incredible performance against New England, I really, 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 really do believe that that's, a competition, a conversation that the club needs to
and here's
have.
the other thing, John, is the new manager is going to reevaluate everybody. So it's not going to matter anyway. So at that point, if I'm the new manager, whoever the heck I am, I come in with an open mind and just say, okay, yeah, I get it. Crepeau's a keeper that makes the World Cup, whatever. But these guys have got to duke it out. And whoever has the better go of it, then that's who's going to get the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I really hope for Otero's sake, that's what I do. Again, another kind of academy kid. I think he played in the academy for 1 year and then was on OCB for 2 years. And then that's when he got bumped up when, what's his name? The keeper that had the tib-fib compound fracture against New York, ironically.
Stad Jar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mason.
So, but
don't forget this too, John. There's 2 academy keepers right behind him, and Tristan Himes and Juan Rojas. And Juan Rojas is like, from what I understand, and coaches I've talked to, academy coaches and whatnot, he's the next coming, man. They all love this kid. He is very good. I think he has a knock right now because I haven't seen him on the bench for OCB, and they might be using him in the GA Cup games too because he's young enough to be in those.
Yeah.
But he's the next coming. Tristan Himes has had an up and down go of it this season, but when Tristan Himes is on, and John can say this, he's on. The kid is fantastic. His communication is excellent. He's a very communicative goalkeeper. He's very involved. He wears the armband for OCB a majority of the time. He is, as long as he can figure out his positioning, I have no doubts in my mind that kid will eventually be with the first team.
Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing is Himes is only, a year younger than Otero. That's the amazing. That's the incredible thing. I mean, that's. I think we brought it up on this show before that goalkeeper, at least OCB and down, is stacked right now. Where we're having to get rid of really, really good talent. I'm saying kids that are getting called into U.S. national youth camps that are looking elsewhere because they know in 3-4 years when they get to be 19, 20 years old, they're going to potentially have 4 or 5 other keepers in front of them, which is a good problem to have, which, it's awesome. But, this whole conversation about Otero and Crepeau kind of brings us into the next topic, kind of Luke and I talked about it a week or 2 ago, but I really want to get your perspective on it. Sure. Who you think, who's on the selling block heading into the summer. We keep talking about bringing players in. Yeah. Nobody's talking about you have to get rid of some players then. So in your opinion, who will go 5, not in any order? Who do you think are the 5 that, really are on the chopping block, if you will?
I think the first name that comes to mind for me is Duncan McGuire. And listen, we have a great history with Duncan. I'm a big Duncan fan. I've always liked Duncan. Out of our string of college strikers, I always, he was my second favorite, right behind Daryl DK. Daryl DK always be my guy. I even predicted Duncan McGuire to Orlando City in that draft. I kept saying like, hey, I think Orlando City's going to take this guy. And everyone's like, no, he just has 1 year of numbers with Creighton. I said, yeah, but he's got something there and Poppy loves his strikers and whatever. It's just he's on $1 million a year and he just hasn't provided enough for Orlando City to be on $1 million a year. And the problem is he goes from being the only out and out striker for Orlando City right now to a sort of luxury piece once this team changes formation and figures out another way to do it, right? Because right now this team has been playing with 2 forwards up top, one that kind of like tucks in behind and the other one that normally goes up and wide most of the time, right? It's been Tiago for a good chunk of it, but we saw Spicer do a little bit of this role against DC. I just don't think there's a spot for him. I think once Griezmann comes in, it's probably Griezmann and Tincho together up top, most likely, unless you figure out some kind of other way to do it. If it's not them two, I think Tiago's had better production there. I think you can argue Spicer's had better production there so far. Duncan continues to be banged up, and I'm sorry, but the best skill is your availability. If you can't be available for this team and you can't get on the field to make a difference, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, right? I mean, it's all moot at that point. So considering his salary, considering the fact that there were teams that have been interested before and are probably still interested now, whether it's an MLS transfer or whether it's outside of the league, I think the team probably looks to potentially get out of his contract if that's the case, because I'm convinced that Marco Pasalic gets sold. And he's the other one, and he's not one where I think he needs to get sold. I just think he does get sold. He's another one on my list. And I think when he gets sold, I don't think this team goes for a direct replacement for him because he's kind of out of a position right now with the way we're playing. I think they go for a prolific, like, number 9 or a prolific, like, middle of the park 8 or something to that effect of like somebody who can just change the game, being in sort of the center of the park or just really up top next to Griezmann. I think that's kind of the way it goes. So Duncan Maguire for me is my first one. I don't know how you feel about Duncan, but that's kind of my thought.
I agree. I mean, I think he'll be a late sale. We'll sell him late. We'll go, let's see what we can bring in. And then, kind of once we get somebody locked in and pen to paper, then, we'll be shopping him around type of deal and, getting interest. And then once pen's put to paper, I would see it happening, with another striker. I would see it happening very quickly where we get rid of Duncan. I would 100% agree with you that Pasalic, I mean, I've said it on this show a lot. If we go with what it seems like they're wanting to go with, which is a 3 center back position, Pasalic doesn't want to defend. He's not suited to be, a number 9, a true number 9. He's not, and with Griezmann's going to be the one that tucks in underneath as almost the false 9. There's really not a spot in a 3 center back system for him to play, because he's either going to have to be a wing back or play in the center, and he doesn't do either well, and so yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you on both of those. One guy I brought up, interestingly enough, several weeks ago, something like that, was I think David Brecalo's gone. I think there's somebody that they're going to shop around, try to get rid of him and get somebody that is better, because for whatever reason, he looked really good as a left back last year, but then we put him at center back and he's never looked the part of the player we thought we were getting, or the player that was advertised to us when we got him.
And can I say this? I think Adrian Marine has done well sliding inside. Yeah. I think he's done better sliding inside. I know this fan base doesn't want to give Adrian Marine a lot of credit, but like, guys, look at his numbers once he slid inside. I know like overall FOTMob or Sofa scores aren't there, but look at the underlying statistics that are there. He arguably has some of the best statistics out of the back 3 almost every single game, and you can see it at this point. Yes, he's still going to make a mistake or two or whatever it is, but the guy has settled in, and I think to your point, it's kind of made it hasn't given an opportunity to Brecalo. And again, I feel like when Brecalo has played on that back 3, he's been the weakest link out of the 3 of them. Because I just don't, to your point, I just don't think he's a center back. And I don't think he's solid enough. And I don't think he hasn't had enough like basis and strength here. So I think that's a 1-for-1, if that makes sense. I think they shop him and then they end up bringing another center back in that can kind of assume a role a little bit later on. Because I think the center back they need to find, as much as I like Iago and as much as I think Adrian Marine can put in a shift, they got to find an heir apparent to Janssen, which they haven't found yet. They need a communicator, a cerebral player who can organize the back line well and still has the skills to also obviously play the position, right? That's what they need. They need somebody who can follow in Janssen's footsteps. So if Janssen only has one more year left or whatever that is after this, they've got somebody ready to go to say, okay, we'll plug this guy in and we feel comfortable with the way it's going to go.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what they were kind of hoping Brekalo was going to be, with him. Obviously, it was never going to be Schlegel, because you would not say anything about Schlegel's game cerebral, except for maybe he lost his mind while he was on the pitch. But
right.
But yeah, we I think it would actually happen the opposite of what we just said was going to happen with Maguire, which you alluded to, where we get rid of Brekalo and then bring somebody in, because right now, with Marin stepping in there, and you're right, like he passes. To me, he's passed the eye test. He's done a good enough job, not a great job, not even a good job. He's done a good enough job. He's kind of helped stabilize the bat, our defense, where we've outside of Saturday, we'd given up one goal in the past 4 matches all together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it to me that's the next guy. If to me that's almost the number one guy that will get sold in the summer. Kind of the first out, maybe Pasalic, depending on how far Croatia goes. But
and I'll say this about Marin too. The reason why I don't think he gets shipped, because a lot of fans are like, get him out of here, blah blah, whatever. Number one, he's on a green card now, so the international spot thing doesn't matter. It's not an argument you can use. Number two, he's not on a high salary. He's fairly cheap compared to everybody else on that defense. And number three, his contract's up at the end of the year. He has an option after this year. So if the team really wants to part ways, or if the new manager comes in and is like, no, I don't see a spot for this guy, he's just going to go. They're going to let him walk at the end of the year. So you're not going to get much value for him anyway. So I just think it makes more sense to sell Brekalo. And then again, if you really don't like Adrian Marin, you let him walk at the end of the year and he does what he can. But like, again, for those people that like to look at the score, he's at a 6.87. That's the highest ranked out of any defender for Orlando City this year, which I know is not a high bar. I get it. The defense has been bad, but he does have some pretty solid performances in there. So if you really want to go and look at the stats, you certainly can, because it's definitely interesting, and he definitely is contributing where he needs to. Like for center backs, he's in the 87th percentile for tackles. He's in the 88th percentile for block shots. He's in the 80th percentile in clearances. So like those are all good numbers for a center back and what that looks like. The next guy I'll say, and this might alarm some people because we just signed him to a new deal, I think Eder Atuesta doesn't have a place on this team, because him and Brian Ojeda cannot play together. We've seen Brian Ojeda be the more consistent and I think better player in terms of progression and the things that he does. I think this is where you need to cash in the chips for Eder Atuesta, and you either need to move him within the league or you need to move him somewhere else, because I just don't think he fits what you're trying to do. And he has not had it since like September of last year, right? He's fallen off a cliff. It hasn't been there for him. It is what it is, to use our interim head coach's line. It is what it is for him, but he just doesn't fit, and it just doesn't make a ton of sense. You have enough bodies there, because obviously you have Brian Ojeda, you have Wilder Cartagena's coming back, you've got Otavio, you've got Gusky, you'll have Gervais at post-World Cup. So all those guys will be available for you, so you don't even need to necessarily add if you don't want to add. I still think they do, because I think maybe they make room for Nacho Gomez, which is kind of my like spot that you fill in there. But Atuesta's not it, guys. He just doesn't have it. I don't think he's a good fit for this team. He just doesn't make sense to me, and he's on a high salary. He's going to probably be on $700,000, and it just doesn't make a ton of sense for the team to carry him and Brian Ojeda. And Brian Ojeda is also on about $650,000 or $700,000, so it just doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I know both of them are allocated money to buy down their contracts.
Right.
Yeah, no, you said exactly that. I mean, I think based on what we've seen from Nacho Gomez, I think once the transfer window opens or registration opens, I think we're cashing in on that deal, and we'll make away like bandits. And if he continues to progress the way he looks like he's progressing, we'll make out. I mean, what's his rumored sale tag from his club?
$550K.
Yeah. I mean,
But I'll say this too. Even if like we could even go back to Velez and lowball them because they're actually like they're needing money badly. So we could go back and say, yeah, we have that buy option for 550. What if we come in at 450 and we call it a day? We'll take them off your hands. Don't worry about it. Whatever, and we walk. But I think even at 550, this club looks at that and says, yep, no problem. Whatever. We'll take them on that and run because honestly, that's what I would do. Again, I know he doesn't have a ton of time with the first team, and yeah, he's had some great moments with the first team so far, and I think he's played well for OCB. I think he's the real deal. I thought that when he came in from Velez, I was really excited to see him. He was the most exciting guy. And listen, I love Pedro Leal, but this Nacho Gomez was my guy. I was really excited to see him play for OCB, and he had one game with OCB, and I was like, nope, this kid's got it. Like, he's got it. He's outplaying everybody on the field, which is what you want to see at the OCB level. And then we saw him, of course, with the first team, and he's been really good.
Yeah, and I mean that's the midfield's another central midfielder's another position like keeper where we're just there's a log jam at OCB. I mean, after Nacho you have Judelson, Hilton.
That's the one I feel bad for. I feel bad for Judelson because I just don't see a pathway for him right now.
Yeah. We have a bunch of 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. And they're after Nacho Gomez. I mean, Hilton.
Haruna has done well in the midfield. Who was another draft pick for Orlando City. He's done well for OCB this year. You've got Lacheris can play that center defensive midfielder. Trombino, who plays with OCB a lot. There's a lot of kids that can go and slide in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a log jam. There's a log jam there. The funny thing is according to FootMob, Judelson's worth quite a bit more than Nacho is transfer value right now.
I was going to say, and people might not like this, but I think Judelson could be we sell him out of OCB kid because I just don't see a spot for him right now. I like Judelson's game a lot. I just don't know that they like it more than Gusky's. And I don't even know if I like it more than Gusky's, to be honest, because I keep going back and forth with these dudes. Judelson is a more physical player than Colin Gusky is. So it really just depends on how the team wants to look at it. But I could see Judelson very easily being one of those kids where it's like, he probably doesn't see the first team very much, but we do right by him and we sell him to give him an opportunity to try to go play somewhere else.
And it won't be a sale, and this is no offense to him. It just kind of has to do with the North American bias. I think it'll be a sale to an MLS club, and then he moves overseas from there.
I could see that for sure.
Definitely. So,
besides that, though, John, I don't know that there's really anybody else I would move because I think at that point you're kind of in a decent spot. I would have said Angulo to start the year, but obviously he's been key for us, and I'm not moving him at this point. I do think it'll be interesting to see, with how much he's going to be running, if any of your left wingers can really play that role. I'm not convinced that they can. So I think that's a question you have to ask yourself, that if you do bring in a manager who's going to play with a back three or a back five, can you find enough players to play that left wing back role? Now, I'll say this. Bernardo Ryan has made the bench for Orlando City. He is a kid that can play that role. John's obviously seen him a lot as well. He's quick as lightning. That kid is nutso. He very much reminds me of Angulo when he gets out on the break. He just he can beat dudes easily and leave them in the dust. So I'd be curious to see if they more so go in that mold, because Angulo can't run every single game. You're going to have to give him a rest somewhere. And no offense to Reed Brown, but he doesn't have that kind of speed and that kind of go-forwardness. He's more of a stay-at-home kind of left back. That's kind of his bag. But then when you look at other players like Spicer and even Sajarin or Sukata, they don't defend to the level that Angulo is going to be able to defend to. They just don't have that pure speed that Angulo can use. And I know that's funny because Spicer, when he played for Toronto, was a left wing back, but that his defense was never his bag. It was his going forward part that was the part that they liked. So I think that's a question that you have to ask yourself, is that I think you end up coming into a situation of does this work? This is where I think Jalen Yearwood could have an opportunity, depending on the manager that comes in. He's done very well for OCB as of late. He is a guy who can get forward, but he's also a guy who can defend very well. He's a natural right back, but he can play left back when he needs to. Actually, for the last game for OCB, he played left back. I thought he was one of the best players on the field outside of Caraballo. So there's questions to be asked there in terms of how you're filling out your depth. But I'm really curious to see where Ricardo attacks the top part of the roster. Because remember, publicly he said to people that he wants to bring in, 2 or 3 defenders he said he wanted to bring in to kind of stabilize the team. I'm curious to see where he brings in those defenders at, because unless you're not sold by either wing back spot, I could see one coming in, the center back, like we talked about already, but I don't know where else you're necessarily going to pull a guy in to make a difference.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially because, Taifi fits that mold of a wingback a little more than Dorsey does. Period. Because, and even though like Dorsey's known for his attacking, I still just feel like Taifi's been a little bit more threatening in the attack than Dorsey has. Of course, Taifi's been a sample size. Dorsey's been a little bit bigger of a sample size. And then just, I feel, defensively, obviously, Dorsey's a liability. A true defender should never have let his man get by him as easy as he did on DC's winning goal on Saturday.
No reason. Yeah.
And then, yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, Angulo, he was a guy that I was shocked that we was an option this year, gave him an option.
Yeah.
But the dude's made me eat my words. I mean, he's one of
mine too.
I think he has the most assists on the team. He's defensively, he's been doing very well. Has the amount of recoveries they only have on FootMob his attacking chart, where it shows the percentiles. I'd love to see his recoveries percentile, because that has to be very close to the 99 percentile with as many defensive recoveries as the guy does on nearly every match. Right. But you're right. I mean, and you even saw it a little bit on Saturday where they kind of told him to stop running. When they brought Spicer in, they're like, just chill back a little bit. And then they ended up bringing Reed Brown in and, moving Angulo. It looked like they moved him more centrally. It don't look like there at the end we almost had 4 midfielders with Angulo being slotted in there as well. 4 central midfielders.
So Angulo's in the 88th percentile in defensive recoveries.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's a nutso number for something like that. Like that's a crazy number. So, and he's averaging just over 6 recoveries per 90, which is, again, a nutso number. Like that is
good.
that is a crazy number. And again, he is even like in tackling, he's in the 79th percentile in tackling, 1.6 tackles per 90. Like that's, for a player his size and really not a defender first mentality, that's really good. Like really good. So I'm curious to see. I think it all depends on the manager. I think that's what confuses me about this window, John, is that you have to think that the front office has identified the manager, because you're not going to go out and get all these players and then have a manager come in and be like, nah, these guys are all shit. I don't want any of these dudes. Like, it's just not going to, like, obviously you're not going to do that with Griezmann. He's Griezmann. But, like, you're not going to go and get other players to supplement Antoine Griezmann and just hope that the coach likes him. Like, that's not going to work, because then you're going to have to turn around and do the cycle all over again in a couple years. What I do think needs to happen, though, and we talked about the Janssen replacement already, you need an heir apparent to Janssen. I think you need to do that this window. You got to figure it out now. I think the other question this club has to ask itself is, do they have enough if Wilder Cartagena doesn't come back next season to hold it down in the midfield? I think Luis Otavio will get there by the end of the season. As of late, I think he has been very good, and I think people are shortchanging the hell out of this kid, and I do not understand why. But guys, remember, he just turned 19 years old, and he's doing the kind of crazy crap that he's doing already. He's only going to get better, and I'm telling you, the ceiling on him is higher than what we saw with Cesar Araujo, and I loved Cesar, but his ceiling is higher than what Cesar is going to give you. I think he's got it. The issue is going to be, is there enough around him? Like, is him and Brian Ojeda the correct partnership? And if it is, great. Who's behind them? You've got Gervais, you've got Gusky, maybe Atuesta, but we're hoping he gets sold. You got to see what's there for that. But then again, does the team feel comfortable enough to pull from its academy? Do they just say, we don't need another senior guy, let's just call up Dylan Judelson? It makes your midfield young, but at least you have all these dudes at that point. So that's another one that you have to figure out. And then the other one that I think people are not talking about, and I don't think it needs to be addressed now, is How does Tincho fit in when Griezmann comes in? Where does he fit in when Griezmann comes in? Because guys, and John knows this, and I know John didn't read the whole thing because it was a very long article. But my Griezmann article, especially at the end, talked about what spaces Griezmann likes to play in. And Griezmann very similarly plays in the same spaces that Tincho does. So there's going to be conflict there. But I talked about in that article how you can avoid that conflict. But what it does is it requires Tincho to get higher and wider, something that he has not wanted to do the past year and a half. He did it a decent amount with Godoy Cruz before he came to Orlando City, but he hasn't done it for Orlando City. So either you got to work with him on that part of his game and hope that he can figure that part out, or you have a question that you have to ask yourself of, is he the right fit on this team to make it work and make sense? Because they're going to be butting into each other if you don't kind of clear the path for Griezmann.
Yeah, that will be the interesting one. Because neither player, Griezmann or Ojeda, like to be that forward guy. They want to drop in underneath and everything. I think, with both players being very smart players, obviously Griezmann's on a different level. And with the right coach to put the players around them in the right positions, I honestly am excited for that duo up top. You have a right foot dominated player, to play the left side to cut in. You have a left foot dominant player to play the right side to cut in. And I think it's one of those that if once they learn to work with each other, I think that, especially as much as, and because Ojeda did it Saturday night, as much as the dude likes to play the dummy ball. I mean, imagine Taifi playing a ball on the ground to Ojeda dummying it, and Griezmann coming in from the left and just smashing one. Which is what they were looking for on Saturday, and unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Sure.
So, but I mean, I think it's something that we're not going to have. With the right manager and with those two players, as long as they get along, which I would imagine they did, I would imagine by now that, Griezmann's spoken fairly in depth with, especially Janssen and Ojeda and Cartagena with, the kind of the three figureheads of the team.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that, is it going to be pretty at first? Probably not. They will probably run into each other a couple times. But once they get it figured out after a month or so of playing with each other, and that all depends on the timing of Griezmann actually getting here and the team ramping up training, for the World Cup. If they start at the beginning of July, I think that we have a chance to hit the ground running with Griezmann and then fill in the other players, that we bring in. If he waits until July 15th, a week before our first match, the issues may be there. But I really think that, especially because you see with the way at times we looked with Muriel and Ojeda on the pitch. Muriel wanted to occupy a lot of the same space as Ojeda did, and there were times that they played, especially on the counter, just beautiful soccer.
Sure.
Is it something that on paper you're going to look and you're going to go, who's our out and out number 9 and who's our false 9 type of deal,
Oh, I don't even care about that at that point. I think as long as both players kind of know the spots they're going to be in and where they can find each other, I don't care if they're a 10, a 9, an 8, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I think all that matters is they're not occupying the same space and they're on top of each other, and then they know where to find each other when it's time to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be able to figure that out. I think if Ojeda can figure that out with playing with what Ellis is his 4th different player he's played up front with this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think if they can kind of get it figured out, and Ellis and him are already have found each other, and obviously, Ellis we don't know yet, become close to the player Griezmann is. But, obviously Griezmann is 10 times the player Ellis is right now. And that's not dissing Ellis at all. It's just that's how good Griezmann is. I really think that because Ojeda knows he's good, but he seems to be the type of player, and Griezmann does to a point as well, They're
Mhm.
the humble good. They're not the Neymar, Ronaldo, Messi, where it's no, I'm
Sure.
good and it's my way or the highway. They both, kind of seem, yeah, I'm good, but I want to help the team the best I can to win, type of deal.
Sure. I guess my biggest thing, and this is where I think the big question gets asked, right, is if Pashlitz gets sold in the summer, which we expect him to, where does this team turn its attention? Because if you say, like, let's say, for example, if you want to go out and get a very good striker, right, or let's say they go for a world class striker, right, you're automatically pushing either Ellis to the bench or you're pushing Tincho further back in the formation, which Tincho struggled in so far this
Mm-hmm.
year. So you've got to figure out a way to still get Tincho involved. Obviously, you want to find a way to get Griezmann involved, but then you'd still have to figure out a way to get your striker involved. And again, I don't think this team would target a target striker. I don't even think they necessarily would target a poacher. I think they would go out and target a striker who can play with the ball at their feet as well and be able to create alongside the other three, right? Your
Yeah.
goal is to have all three create with each other. And basically, whoever scores the goal, whoever gets the assist, you don't care. Just all these guys are just kind of contributing to each other, and that's what makes the difference, right? So is
Yeah.
it a guy who can play the right now the sort of Thiago Spicer role of like they're going to stay wide but they're going to tuck in when they get to the box and score there, so more of like a hybrid like winger to striker kind of role? Is it going to be somebody who goes straight up top and plays right next to Griezmann and then Tincho has to come back and play that role? There's a lot of questions to be asked in terms of what that looks like and what the team could target. And again, you're going to have an open DP spot if Paslic gets sold, which again, we're kind of
Mhm.
expecting him to do that. Or do you try to go into the midfield and say, you know what? What if we go out there and get a prolific 8 who can play box to box, who can help us on both sides of the ball and is going to be really good on both sides, and just, depend on Tincho, Griezmann, Thiago Spicer, and everybody else that's in the attack to just be able to create their stuff when they need to create, but then that 8 can get involved when they're sort of the trailing runner behind everybody else.
If it was me, and we kind of talked about this at that OCB Miami match,
Yeah.
I would go after a prolific 8. What's the one thing that this team has struggled to do for the last 2.5 years, and that's break the lines in the press. Who helps you do that? Number 1 and number 8. We really started struggling when whatever Funka Twist has been in the last 8 months. That's when we really started to struggle, and that's when you saw this team start to slide, is when all of a sudden the Tuesta couldn't complete the pass and couldn't hold on to the ball and turn with the ball. All of a sudden we started to really struggle.
Mhm.
So I personally, if and when Pasalic goes, I think it's more of a question of when at this
Mhm.
point, based on everything that's been made public. I really do think, especially if the incoming manager wants to play something like a 3-5-2 or just a 3 center back system, and then the two wing backs. I really think that they need to find, and nothing against Brian Ojeda, who's the closest thing to an 8 right now we have. But I think there's a lot of levels that we could potentially get above Brian Ojeda that would just set this, that could even without Griezmann would change the whole
And
outlook for the team.
And to explain it to people a little bit more of kind of like what we're, kind of going around, right, for everyone out there is think of Junior Urso in his prime, but level up even beyond that, right? When Junior Urso played on this team and was kind of the second guy in the midfield, he played as more of an 8. He was a box-to-box kind of guy. Think about the impact that he had for Orlando City, but then add at least another level onto what he was able to provide. I think that's the best comparison for folks that are around in the Junior Urso days to kind of understand that, because this team has never really had really great 8s. If you go back through its history, it's never really kind of played with those great 8s or anything like that. So that's somebody that I think you can kind of think about and go, okay, this is kind of what we're trying to get at. But yeah, I mean, again, I'm not going to throw names out there because I'm not the best at knowing what prolific eights would even be available for this team to try to go and grab. But like, I wouldn't be against getting a prolific 8 if you really felt like the rest of your offense was going to click with Griezmann, which obviously it should, because again, he's another very cerebral player, right?
Yeah.
The game just comes very easy to him. And I think the one thing for people to notice is the game slows down for him. And I think that's why Griezmann's able to make sort of the passes that he makes and the runs he's able to make and all those kind of stuff. The game is a slower speed for him. So he's able to see 3 or 4 passes ahead, whereas other guys just can't. And that's going to change your offense automatically right there, right? So...
Well, it's funny you say that because to me, and this is kind of off of what we've been talking about. Was it just me, or did I see that a couple times Saturday with Ellis, where it just seemed like he got the ball and the whole team took a collective sigh of relief, like, all right, we're good. He's got the ball. Now let's go attack.
Yeah, I think there's a confidence that a lot of casual fans might not be aware of what Ellis brings to this team, because I think he's probably the first striker we've had in a while who isn't just a guy we're trying to get him the ball so he just tries to hoof it towards the net, right? And there's no problem with that. Like, that's where strikers make their bread and butter. You put the ball in the net, you shoot as many times as you can, hopefully on target, and you get it in the goal. But with Ellis, there's just another level that some of our strikers just haven't had, right? It's he can play with his back to goal and pass, and he's comfortable with his back to goal, where some strikers freak out. They're like, oh my God, where's the goal? I don't know where I'm at. He takes the contact and he figures out where he needs to get the ball to next. And I think this team was a little bit caught off guard maybe because they're like, wow, this kid is so comfortable not being in necessarily the right positions, but he doesn't care because he's not always looking for himself to shoot. He's looking to sometimes give it off, which is if you guys have watched OCB at all, the beginning of this year or most of last year, Justin Ellis played more of a 10 anyway. So it gave him an opportunity to kind of pick up those skills of being sort of a 10 and understanding where he needs to distribute and where he needs to play the ball. And I think that's why he's so comfortable with it now. Yeah,
and it'll be interesting to see what he looks like this time next year physically, because to me, he completely transformed his body in the offseason. You know, and this isn't me. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm fat, but he was definitely like not your soccer slender type of guy out on the field last season. You know, he was a little bit bigger than everybody as far as like thick. He was a little bit thicker than everybody, a little bit slower. And then he comes out this year and all of a sudden he's like toned and skinny. And it's like, you know, hats off to him. Like, it's a great thing that he did. So I'm saying, you know, with being that, you know, 18 going into 19, when, you know, your body really starts to be able to be transformed, I can't wait to see what he looks like a year from now. And I honestly think that with the type of player he is, depending on what they decide to do with Ojeda, you know, even though he is a younger player, but we do see all over the league 17, 18-year-olds playing a lot more.
Right.
And that's another case to take a midfielder is I feel he's, you know, Ellis is just taking the next step in his progression and, you know, could potentially, you know, with the new manager, you know, be that type of forward that we need to be with Griezmann. Because you and I know watching OCB, the dude wants to score, but he doesn't care. Like, he takes an assist as seriously as a goal. I mean, it shows. I mean, how many strikers, the assist that he had to Ojeda, was that Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday. Mm-hmm. How many strikers would have turned and tried to whale a shot to the net there?
Yeah.
And the dude was composed, took the bump, and laid it off to Ojeda, you know, right to Ojeda's strong foot. I mean, Ojeda took a step and could just unleash on it. Yeah. And if you can do that to both sides of your body, which I know Ellis can, you know, and you have on one side you have Ojeda and the other side you have Griezmann. You know, and one thing that shocked me about Ellis, and I thought it was just, he's playing in OCB, it's the lack of skill. How many times he's got 3 or 4 guys around him and you can kind of tell the ball's being like juggled around, and then all of a sudden the 3 or 4 guys are standing behind him and he has the ball in front of them. That's just, he did that several times on Wednesday, several times on Saturday, and yes, it got stolen from him a couple times, but the amount of times he's able to keep possession, and it showed with his goal on Saturday, just the quick feet that he does have, because that goal, even though it was kind of a slop goal, the skill that it took for him to get that second touch on the ball was
Oh, no doubt.
outrageous.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting because again, he comes from that OCB group that I think a lot of those players are very like unselfish players, right? They very much are about, let me set my teammate up, let me do this, let me do that. It's constant throughout the year, especially in the beginning of the year when him and Pedro Leal, Harvey Sajarin, Caraballo were all playing together. Very unselfish football between all of them. They were all just kind of contributing to each other's success and all the other stuff. And now they're a little bit more disconnected because really Caraballo's been the only consistent mainstay with OCB this season, with Sajarin making the bench a couple times and what have you. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be against, Griezmann and Ellis necessarily playing next to each other. I think the club needs to ask itself, if you get the opportunity though to bring in a world-class striker, do you do it, right? Like if you're able to make that phone call and make it work, do you pull the trigger, right? And then just bring Ellis on as a sub and figure it out that way, or just assume that Ellis eventually will get sold regardless, so you might as well just start preparing for it afterwards. Because again, there's some people that are saying, if Spurs get relegated, bring Richarlison in. He's not my guy. I'm not a huge fan of Richarlison, but I can understand where people are coming from in terms of like a big name that can come in and make a difference for you, right? So, but again, like an 8 can do the same thing. You bring a midfielder in who can boss the midfield and play and make people look dumb in the center of the park. That's just as good or better than you bringing in a prolific striker and trying to figure it out, some other way. So,
or even with the speed we have on the wings, just put a good ball that gets over the opposition's fullback instead of him being able to take a couple steps back and either head it out of play or head it to one of his players makes a huge difference too.
Yeah.
Especially if with Angulo's self-explanatory, and then if we have Taifi on the other side, who's very close to just as fast as Angulo is, not as quick, but top speed, I would say, is nearly just as fast. That could be, a good quality, borderline world-class number 8, could be the different, to me, like, people always talk about strikers and goalies and everything. To me, like, if you're a good team, a team that's going to win a championship, you have to have a solid central midfield, a solid number 8 and a solid number 6. And, part of that is reading Pep's books and how he describes his philosophies, which I don't agree with everything he says, trust me. But, I really think if you can control the center of the park, it makes everybody else's job so much easier because they don't have to worry about covering as much ground, from your center backs to your fullbacks to your wingers, to your strikers. If you can have 2 or 3 guys that control the, center half, if you cut the diagram, if you cut the field into 9 parts, the center 3/9 of the field, the game becomes much easier and much more enjoyable for everybody involved, including people watching.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and again, if you look at any of the good teams, especially in MLS over the last couple of years, their midfield is sort of the engine room of how they're successful, right? Look at Vancouver's transformation. Their combination of Kubas and Sebastian Berhalter are 2 that you can point to that make sense for you. Look at LAFC. Now they have Estacio, and any of the random other guys they've put him with that have been quality, right? Those are the kind of partnerships that end up bringing you really far in this league and help you lift trophies. I mean, it's just as simple as that. When Cesar Araujo was in his prime with Wilder Cartagena, that was a combo you didn't want to come up against, right? They were just, awful to play against, and you knew you were going to get beat up in the center of the park. That's what we're talking about in terms of what you could do. But again, it all falls on the manager part, right? And again, we're all under the impression that Martin Perlman is not the guy. Cool. I think we're aware of that at this point. I don't think, to me, there's not a scenario, I think, at this point that he ends up keeping the job unless somehow he runs the table. And again, I don't think he's going to do that. I'm just curious to see who this manager is, like who they identify and who they end up bringing in, because I think you need to solve that first. I'm not saying you need to announce it to the fans, but as a club, you need to get this person to sign on the dotted line and then go make your signings that you're going to go make. Because if you start making signings without a head coach again, because again, really you kind of made the winter ones with the idea that you potentially had a lame duck coach, because that's what it turned into. It's going to be a bad look, especially to this fan base, of them being like, why are they signing players? They don't have a manager yet. Like, we don't have a permanent manager. And again, I'm not going to necessarily source the people that have been saying that Perlman's going to be the guy, but it's a lot of interim tags. There is nobody on his staff has been signed to a permanent deal anywhere. He just hasn't been. Goldberg hasn't. Seti, who just joined him recently, hasn't. The only one that has is Baena, who has been there since Oscar Pareja, and that's the goalkeeper coach, and that's it. Yeah. Even their strength and conditioning coach is still an interim guy who went into the season as an interim guy. Yeah. So there's a lot to figure out there. And again, I think at this point, what Perlman and Goldberg are doing is they're fighting for places within the organization to stick around when this manager comes in.
But yeah, that's one thing that I didn't at first, and then the more I talk to him and the more I see, completely agree with Luke that anybody that was on staff with Pereira, just no offense to them, no offense to Pereira, they just need to go, because from the player's perspective, you need to have that shift where you look over to the sideline and you don't see one of those guys, so that subconscious click doesn't happen that makes you want to do whatever made us bad or what have you. I mean, right. And to me, even though we didn't really sit back and defend on Saturday, you could still see the players a little hesitant to push forward when we had possession. And I know that's against what Perelman wants, because I've seen it with OCB. They get possession and they go. Right. There's no standing around. So, I just feel like that, as much of an attribute, the only exception may be the goalkeeper coach, because I feel like he's a very good goalkeeper coach. Sure. Just what he did with Gillespie and what he's done with the guys here that have been here for a while is incredible. So, he may be one exception, because I don't believe that he does anything too terribly tactical when it comes to the other 10 players on the field, setting them up or whatever. So he may be the one exception. Obviously it'll be a new strength and conditioning coach, most likely, because Pazan was left in the off season.
Yeah, they haven't replaced him since.
Yeah, and they haven't officially replaced him. So, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very busy summer outside of just the World Cup.
Which will be abnormal for Orlando City, because normally we're not the busiest team in the summer. And so I think that's what's going to catch a lot of people off guard this summer, is that you're going to see moves. Like, you're going to see moves this summer like you haven't really for Orlando City before. The nice thing about Griezmann coming in when he's coming in is that it gives him time to not only get used to living in Orlando, but he'll have time to kind of meld into the team. From what I understand, they'll be on a light training schedule. I think it's like the first 2 or 3 weeks of the World Cup, they're like completely off, but then they do come back and they start doing some light training and some install and things like that. Guys who are getting treatment will be able to continue to get their treatment and go through all of that. But it'll really give Griezmann a lot of time, and that's why I think the manager hire should happen early in the World Cup season if you can, right? If there's a possibility to do it, unless you're going after one of the big fish that are actually coaching in the World Cup, there should be no reason why you can't bring your manager in to go do that then. And I don't think we're necessarily after any of the big fish, in terms of World Cup coaches. I think we might be looking for somebody who could be a casualty if another team is looking for a big fish, if that makes sense. And so I'd bring somebody in as soon as you can early in that offseason, let them work with their people, install their coaches that they want to install, get OCB on the same page as well, because obviously you want OCB to be, kind of a reflection of the first team. That's kind of what your academy teams are for. And then just kind of see what you have and see what you got, because it's going to be a really interesting season. And again, like we said at the top of this show, you still have an opportunity to get a play-in game at the very least if you have enough at the break. And again, same thing with the Open Cup. If this team can beat New England and then beat the winner of Knoxville or Columbus, which again, two beatable teams. I don't want to look past New England, but if you do beat New England, you're up against either Columbus or Knoxville. Again, beatable teams. After that round, you get Griezmann to join you to finish out the Open Cup. And then at that point, you've just completely flipped the tournament on its head. And I would argue we have the easier side of the bracket when you look at the U.S. Open Cup bracket. So that's why we keep saying it's a competition you should go for, because, again, it's not nearly as difficult, whereas opposed to if you look at Leagues Cup already, we have to start our Leagues Cup campaign against Monterrey, which is nuts. And, like, we're not going to beat Monterrey. This team in its current form is not going to beat Monterrey. There's no way. And so you're just not going to get enough there for Leagues Cup, and it's a sham competition anyway, so we don't have to go into that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see the whole manager choice and kind of how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would not mind seeing Gallardo from Argentina. He's been the number one guy once he became available. He became the number one guy that I thought we should hire.
He's been my guy. I've been over him over Felipe Luis. I like Felipe Luis, but I like Gallardo a little bit better, and I think he's the guy. He's the guy you're looking for. Plus, he has the experience at the top levels in Argentine football. It's exactly what you're looking for. He knows how to deal with press, and especially hard press. He's dealt with some big names when he was at River Plate. So, like, this is the perfect dude to try to plug in to your system.
Yeah, and Felipe Luis, it's kind of, to me, the big question mark. Is it a product of his, is his team's success a product of him, or is it the team, the players that are that he's
Flamengo having
managing?
literally everybody
Yeah.
in Brazil. Yeah.
So, that was my hesitation on him, as much as I remember him from Chelsea when I really started supporting, following Chelsea. I don't follow them much anymore because I got sick of the circus that club's turned into. But really in 08 through about 23, 24, they 23, 24, 08 to like 23, 24 is when I really stopped. But I really followed them as much as I could, because one of my friends in college used to live near Chelsea when he was in the military, so he got me hooked to him. But remember him from back then, and it's just like, yeah, I remember him, but like, like I said, is he that good of a manager? He obviously was, let go of mid-season, basically late season.
Right.
Is it something like that? But yeah, you got anything else? Anything specific you wanted to talk about that you can talk about here? And
yeah, the only other thing I want to say too, and I think for fans for the coaching search, and again, I haven't necessarily heard names, so I don't want to be like, hey, this is what I'm hearing or whatever. But don't be surprised if this team does kick the tires on an MLS coach or a former MLS coach. I think there's a possibility in this team's due diligence to look at managers. Like, I know the big name is Wilfred Nancy, and there's an understanding that he might be looking for a European job, so that might happen. But coaches like Jim Curtin, I talked about Jesse Marsh if Canada decides to part ways with him. When that happens, there are some of those managers out there that very much understand MLS who are winners that this team might try to kick the tires on. And it's a possibility, right? And the reason why the front office would go after a manager like this is because of their understanding of the league. And that right there is going to be a big piece of why you do that. Now, listen, it's going to get easier next year because the schedule is going to more align to a European calendar. So that whole understanding of how that's going to work is going to get a little bit easier. But don't be surprised if we get to a point like if you get a Bogert bomb where it's like, hey, Orlando City is down to these three coaches or something like that. Don't be surprised if there's an MLS name in there, because I wouldn't be shocked if Orlando City tries to kick the tires on a either recently former MLS coach or a coach that has coached in MLS before and has maybe gone somewhere else and potentially come back.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I mean, I would hate to see Jim Curtin, but it is what it is type of deal.
I think if you see Jim Curtin, I think you should be convinced that this team wants to go in a more Moneyball approach, which doesn't make sense because you just went out and got Griezmann and you're going to pay as much as you are for that. And I don't think Philly ever had a DP at that level.
Rarely,
so
yeah.
I would be shocked if it's somebody like him. But like again, like, and I know people like Nancy, so it's not a hard sell. But like a Nancy, a Jesse Marsh, like guys like that who you could potentially go back to. I'm not saying they're going to go to like a Bob Bradley or, those coaches that sort of aged out that don't make sense, but like, don't be shocked if there's sort of a retread name in there of like somebody who was maybe with a team but didn't get a fair shake and could be back around and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think, Jim Curtin aside, but Marsh and Nancy, I would be over the moon for, just because, especially Marsh has the, track record of in Europe, showing that he kind of knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
And I think Nancy's one of the best managers the league's ever seen, in my opinion. And I love the way Columbus played. Just didn't get a fair shake at Celtic, but yeah, I mean, I would have thought we would have been hearing more by now, especially.
Sure.
Kind of surprised we haven't been hearing more, but
especially when the only rumor that's been floating around again is Martial came up again today, which we cannot shake that rumor. And I know my co-host on LPO said he talked to his sources and they told him it was like dead wrong and they're not negotiating for that player. But what's funny is, for those that didn't see the report, there was a report that came out today by a couple of local media that covers Monterrey and a couple other Mexican teams, because they're all kind of close together in Mexico. And it was basically said that Orlando City offered peanuts to Monterrey for Anthony Martial, and like they were okay with maybe just letting him walk for peanuts. Again, doesn't make a ton of sense to me. He's not a DP to me. He shouldn't be on DP money. If he was on DP money, I think that's a very bad contract deal. Even on TAM, I'm kind of hesitant because he really hasn't been the player that he was like 4 years ago. So I don't really know what you're looking for there. Maybe you're hoping Griezmann can unlock something in him that just doesn't exist right now. I don't know. And again, he's more of a striker / left winger. So like, does he take the Thiago Spicer spot and you hope he can get more out of that? I don't know. Like that rumor confuses me if it is true, but it keeps popping up. So it makes me think there's somewhat of smoke to that rumor. But I also know that Monterrey's trying to get rid of him. So take that for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, with the amount they said, because it was like 3.3 million pesos or something like that, wasn't it?
It comes to like 170,000 US dollars.
Yeah, so I mean, it's
it's peanuts.
You're not gonna
the paperwork.
Yeah, you're not going to sign a guy for that little and turn him into a TAM player or a DP or anything like that. I think if we can get him and he's willing to sign, the right deal and be a bench player, because we have the space. I mean, we still only have 24 of the 30 spots, on our roster taken, if you take out the loaned OCB guys.
Yeah.
So we still have.
Well, what if it's this? What if it's like we're gonna ship out Duncan and he sort of takes Duncan's spot as like a hybrid striker, left winger kind of. This is a guy who can come again. Maybe he starts as a bench piece, but as he starts to prove himself, or if he has the chemistry with Griezmann, maybe it's like, okay, we find a way to get him into the lineup and just find a way to make it work. But again, I think there's a little bit of smoke to this fire. I don't know how much smoke is there or how big the fire is. But this is a guy who played with Griezmann on the national team. They've never played club in the same club before, because I know a lot of people online were asking about this. They do have a connection on the national team, though. So I think that might be where the connection is. But he's had some attitude issues in Mexico. I've defended it a little bit because I did read into it and talk to some people down there, and they basically said that Monterrey made him promises that they didn't keep, and that's why he's pissed off. And a player of his caliber that he was like 3 or 4 years ago, you could understand why he'd be pissed off. Because, guys, 3 or 4 years ago, he came off of almost a 20-goal season in all comps. Like, he was a player. Like, he was very good. And obviously, was it Man U, I think, was the big club he played for in the Prem that everyone remembers him from and whatever. I mean, I think the talent's still there, and he's still fairly young. I think he's 31, right? 30, 31,
31,
something like that.
32, yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
so I
Yeah.
think he's still young in the grand scheme. So if Griezmann can get something out of him, then yeah, maybe you kick the tires on him. But he can't be more than TAM. He has to be a TAM player for you, or it doesn't make sense. So maybe you give him a TAM like prove it contract, kind of similar to like what we did with Pato, because Pato was sort of a TAM prove it contract. Let's see what you've got. Let's see if you can contribute. But this is where, like, if you're going to take a flyer on somebody, this is why I keep banging the drum for Memphis Depay. Corinthians isn't going to re-sign him. They're bickering back and forth in terms of what he wants. I know some people don't like Memphis because he also can have a bad attitude, and he knows the dark arts and all that shit hosiery that you get into and whatever. But like, guys, Memphis Depay scores goals. Like, he knows how to put the ball in the net. He knows how to contribute, and he's going to get under your opponent's skin. It's gonna wreak havoc on things like that. It's not wrong to have players in your squad that are gonna do that. You need some folks that are used to doing the dark arts. If you remember this team when it made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, your dark arts people were Cesar Araujo, Rodrigo Schlegel, Cartagena at times. All those guys would get under your skin. That's what they were supposed to do. That was the whole goal. When Dom Dwyer was here, I know production-wise it wasn't there, but he would drive defenders nuts. He'd get under their skin all the time. He'd get them yellow cards. He'd tip them over when he could and all that kind of shit. That's the kind of stuff you need to kind of like be successful, especially when you're looking at the sort of regional competitions like CONCACAF Champions Cup and all that kind of stuff. You want that little bit of bite and that little bit of sort of shit hosiery that you're looking for. And so I understand a lot of people are like, I don't want this kind of player on my team. The club knows what it's going to get into if it's going for a player like that. But it also has the faith that with Antoine Griezmann presumably being the guy, because I know Janssen's still here, but Griezmann's going to take over that mantle and be the guy. I think you have enough faith for Griezmann to say to these people, whoever it is, whether it's somebody that knows Griezmann or not, that they're going to have respect for who Antoine Griezmann is, and they're going to fall in line. And if they don't, they're going to be in the doghouse, and it's not going to matter. So we'll see if there's any fire to this Martial smoke. I'm going to actually break down some of his numbers later on this week and kind of really see, like, is he worth it if it's somebody that we bring in? But it is interesting that that's sort of the direction that we're going in. There's other French players or other guys that Griezmann's played with that I'd prefer over it. Like, if we could somehow get Koke over here for the last, like, 2 or 3 years of his career, that's a prolific midfielder that could change the game for you right now. I think he'd bury teams in MLS the way he still plays for Atletico Madrid. Again, I don't think it's going to happen because Koke's living his life in Spain. But again, that kind of player is what we're talking about when John and I are talking about somebody who's strong in the midfield. That's a guy who can break lines. That's a guy who can win the ball and kind of get under your skin. So there's a lot of different options out there. I hope Griezmann brings his little book and says, hey, why don't we call this guy? Why don't we call that guy?
And it's interesting, too, because Depay played with Griezmann at Barcelona and Atletico Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
I never put the connection there.
And they got close at Atleti. When they were together at Atleti, they got close. There's that video that went out that was really great where Depay gave him that really nice watch when Griezmann set the club record. I think it was for goals or something like that. They have a really good relationship. And again, Memphis would prefer to stay in this hemisphere. He said that. He's made that public. But Corinthians isn't going to give him the money that he wants. MLS doesn't have that problem. Like, we could go and give him the money that he wants. The thing is, you need to get him motivated, but what better way to get him motivated than to have a guy next to him like Antoine Griezmann who's going to be like, hey, man, remember when we played in those great Atleti days? Let's go tear up MLS. Because you're going to be able to travel around the United States in your free time. You're going to be able to go down to Miami or go to LA and party or go to New York or wherever, right? And party and do your thing. But as long as you're here to help us win games and hoist trophies, I don't give a crap. Like,
or heck, a lot of those guys just go to one of the random beaches on the east or west coast, and nobody will know who you are 90% of the time. I know. I forget which. I think it was Kaká that said. He said that one of his favorite things about being in Orlando was he could be a normal resident. You know, when you're in, especially Brazil and Spain particularly. Mm-hmm. You're under such a microscope as a professional soccer player, professional footballer. Everybody knows who you are, for the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And you really, that's why Ricardo went to Griezmann's house instead of going to a restaurant. Because
in Spain, everyone would have saw him. Yeah.
Everybody in Madrid knows who he is.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot to, living in a city like Orlando where we don't have the media coverage that Miami or New York or LA has. And you can really just be a normal person,
Yeah.
I mean, Messi's different. You can't. Everybody
Sure.
basically knows who Messi is. That's the one that's above Griezmann. you know.
Yeah, yeah. And there's
Um,
not many players on that level, right? It's like Messi, CR7, Mbappe, like people like that, where like they're a whole nother level above
yeah,
everyone else, right?
Neymar a
It's
couple years ago. Yeah,
Yeah, a couple years ago. I don't know that Neymar's there now, but yeah, a couple
no,
years
not now.
ago.
Yeah,
Vinny Jr. maybe for some people is at that level. Like he'd get noticed in a lot of places or whatever. But again, and that's where I'm interested to see where the recruiting comes in, because I don't think we've really seen much yet from the Griezmann sort of recruiting, and maybe we'll see it with the manager, maybe we'll see it with other players and things like that. But I'm really curious to see what that pull is for Griezmann, because he's gonna attract some players. There's gonna be some players that are like, yeah, I maybe wasn't thinking about MLS before, or maybe I wasn't thinking about Orlando and MLS before, but like Griezmann's there, and there's a reason that he's there, so maybe I'll like it too. So let me go over there and talk to them. This is also why, which going back to the original conversation, I totally forgot to mention this, and I should have. We're not even talking about the fact that the Wilfs are gonna put 50, 60, 70 million into the training complex
yeah,
over at Osceola Heritage.
yep,
That's not nothing, guys. That's a lot of money that ownership is going to pour into Osceola Heritage to not only make sure that the men's team has good facilities, but to also make sure that the women's team has equally good facilities and that they can all train under the same roof with their academy structures. Because don't forget, with Orlando Pride moving over to Osceola Heritage eventually, they want to build out the girls' academy over there as well. Because the girls' academy just doesn't really exist in the United States a lot. It exists in some spaces, but not a lot. But Orlando Pride want to grow out the entire academy top to bottom, just like they do for the men's team. Talk about a great opportunity to go make much better facilities and all that kind of stuff. And then there is the cherry on top that you don't get taxed in the state. There's no state tax. So like if you are going to come to the United States and do all that stuff, you're not going to get a state tax, which is kind of nice. So, and again, for somebody like Griezmann who's going to make a lot of money, especially on sponsorship deals, hell, he could buy a beach house and then just let all the stars go go play at his beach house when they're not they're not doing stuff in Orlando.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, the thing too about the facilities is that can be the make or break for top talent too,
mhm.
like
Yeah.
top stars, not talent stars
Yeah.
coming here versus going somewhere else. I mean, you look at one of our big things, and one of the things that I know he obviously had a relationship with the ownership group, but Kaká, the one thing Kaká loved about Orlando is at that time we were one of the few teams with a soccer specific with plans for a
Mhm.
soccer specific stadium.
Right.
So those little things. I mean, you look at like college football, for instance,
Mhm.
and teams are constantly redoing their facilities, and that's
Their
because
facilities are amazing on some of those
yeah,
programs.
and that's because that's what brings the big names. You want to be comfortable. You want to look at, what is it? Madrid has the apartments for each player at their training
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah.
And I'm not expecting Orlando City to
Sure.
necessarily do that, but
Yeah.
you want to be able to relax after not have to drive home necessarily after training. You want to be able to sit and relax after your recovery and everything's done for a little bit, and and have nice facilities where the risk of injury during training is much less, and all of that. So
Well, and even in the
that
stadium, right? Like that's something as well, John, that they're eventually going to have to look at, is that like there might be some improvements going on at the stadium that us fans won't feel or see, but they might be doing it in the players' locker room, like better recovery rooms, better spaces to, get prepped and get ready. But here's the other thing too that I think would have to be addressed with the new coaching staff. You're going to have to find a permanent and probably a very good strength and conditioning coach to come in under a new manager, because stars aren't going to want to come if you don't have those programs
Yep.
set up. If you don't have good athletic trainers, you don't have good strength and conditioning coaches, you don't have good weight coaches or any of these other people, nutritionists and sports psychologists and all that kind of stuff, which I know Orlando City does have a sports psychologist, and she's apparently very good at what she does, and I'm lapsing on her name, and I apologize for that. But that's how you get talent, right? You build those people and you build those squads up. It costs money. There's no doubt about it. But as you continue to build those things up and you continue to work towards those things, that's what top talent's looking for. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't bad then. If I can go here and do this and do that and whatnot, then, you know, you're doing well and you're attracting talent that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm trying to find her name because it's escaping me too.
Yeah. She showed up in a couple of the Cancun videos. I know I remember that, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it'll be interesting because, you know, the other thing, and I know John and I have talked about this a lot with like MLS rules and stuff like that. I'd love for us to go out and get a prolific defender. It's just until MLS rules change and what that looks like, I just don't think a lot of MLS teams are going to take a chance on that. But I wouldn't necessarily be against being one of the teams that pushes the mold and kind of says like, hey, we might be skirting the rules a little bit, or we might be skirting the line, but we're going to bring in a really good defender who we know can defend and do like X, Y, and Z. Like, again, I'm going to throw out a name, and I don't think he's going to do this, but like, what if Virgil van Dijk wanted to leave the Premier League and just retire like on his terms after like 2 years? Like, what if you were able to bring in a guy that used to be like the guy at the top flight, but maybe he's not at the level he was anymore, and you can bring him in and come and be one of the defenders, right? I'm thinking of like a Sergio Ramos, like late in his career when he was kind of like bouncing around from team to team, but just have a guy who can maybe come in who, you know, isn't at his world-class level still, but he's still a very good defender and can bring you a lot of like stability and strength and all the rest of it. I'd love for, and again, unfortunately this isn't going to happen because I think MLS is too gun shy to do it, but they've got to open up the roster rules a little bit to allow people to do that, because MLS almost exclusively spends their DP and top level talent on attackers, right? They just do. They don't spend it on defenders, because whenever you've seen it spent on defense, it normally doesn't work out very well. And so, or it like hamstrings your team, and then you're like, Cincinnati is one of those teams right now. It's in a tough spot because Miles Robinson's been banged up all year, and he's a DP for them, and that doesn't help because he can't get him on the field. And now they have Denke and Evander, and one of them, they haven't been clicking at the same time, and all the issues they're running into with that. But again, if you had an extra spot where it was like, hey, bring in one defender, but who cares about transfer cost or salary, that would open the eyes for a lot of teams in MLS to potentially go out and find that defender. And some teams will hit on that, and some teams won't. They'll bring in defenders they think are good, and they're not good, and they won't assimilate to MLS. So it'd be interesting to see if that eventually breaks.
No, yeah, definitely. And isn't it Andrea Barkelman?
Yes, that's it. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's her official title is Director of Mental Performance.
There you go. Okay.
Same thing.
Yeah, and again, you can also, if you wanted to, and again, more star players you get, you can build out that staff underneath her. So if she has nobody that's underneath her right now, you can bring in more sports psychologists. Again, to use a pop culture reference, think of Ted Lasso, right? They bring the sports psychologist in to kind of help the team, you know, get its mental stuff together. Huge thing right now, sports psychology. People are making tons of money off of it. It's one of those things that how to talk to players, how to connect with them, how to get them out of their head, how to get them back in their head when you need them to. Really important job, but it's a lot for one person to do. So I hope she has a decent team around her, because there's a lot of players and a lot of different cultures on that team.
There is nobody else on at least the website, and you never know exactly what's, you know, behind closed doors, but
be interesting to hear if there is more people below her.
Yeah.
Might be a question to ask for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, the mental health is very important, obviously, but the mental performance in a sport level is insane. When I was playing golf, I never went to a sports performance coach, a psychologist for golf, but I read a lot of books about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference that it made in the way I played was incredible, you know. And I mean, you know, golfers get the bad rap for being, you know, throwing their clubs after they hit a bad shot or cursing and all that.
Sure.
And I mean, it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't, but you know, the way, you know, it even went so far as for my dad, who was always very hard on me growing up in sports, coached me in youth sports, was my assistant coach in soccer, coached me in junior high basketball. All that was very hard on me. Mm. He even said something after I started reading these books on you know, psychology of sports and stuff. about how much better I overcame the adversities that happen on a golf course. And I mean, I never played near the level of golf that the MLS, that the MLS is to soccer, but my point is it's something that's very important. And I know like top players like Cristiano Ronaldo has his own psychologist, has his own nutritionist, but he also had, the club that he plays for also has to have those people, because a lot of the times the assistant coach or the coach doesn't want those people to be, those people don't want to be bothered by the people that aren't paying them, and the coach doesn't want his players to be bothering the people that the club isn't paying for.
Right.
So, a lot of times it's Ronaldo's people work in conjunction with the club and not vice versa. So you have to have, if you're going to have top talent, you have to have those, those positions there, the unsung heroes, if you will.
And to draw the equivalency, John, like Griezmann's probably going to do that, right? He's probably going to have a nutritionist on his own. He's probably going to have a personal trainer that he would prefer to work with, right? And all these guys and gals are going to have to work in conjunction with the club, right? They exist for a reason and all that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where those connections come in. And then also as well, like, does Griezmann's family come over with him right away, or do they wait until the end of the year to come over and do their thing? It'd be interesting to see kind of what it is, because for those that don't know, Griezmann obviously is married, but he also has 3 kids. So he's going to bring all of them with him over as well, and that's a whole process that you have to go through. And obviously, John is somebody who has a child. I'm sure if you had to imagine moving halfway across the world, getting everything set up again, and then you have to go hit the field and do your job, it's not the easiest thing in the world to go do, right? So there's going to be a lot of steps, and so the club's going to be working overtime to really make sure that Griezmann's assimilation goes smoothly, right? And the club has resources they can pull from. Like, there's people that will probably help Griezmann find a house to live in, right? Whether it's the one that he buys or one that he rents for a while or whatever that looks like. They'll find a place for his family. They did the same thing with Nani. They did the same thing with Kaká. They'll do the same thing with Griezmann. They always do with things like that. And even for the lower players, they do the same thing. They find them apartments. They find them houses that they can rent, all that kind of stuff. They do a really good job at that. But that's a whole nother part of the front office team that's going to have to help assimilate all that stuff. And then on top of it, Ricardo's got to find a coach and then bolster the roster like he says he's going to bolster the roster. So a lot of work to be done this summer for this team all around.
Yeah, no, it'll be a busy summer, exciting summer. I mean, we think that, traditionally we get into mid to late December and we start getting excited because it's going to be busy. This summer will be, I hope it's something like we've never seen, because from everything that I know, we've heard, it's supposed to be. So, but I think we'll wrap it up now. Unless you have something specific, something else you want to talk about.
No, it's I'm hopeful for the summer. I know we're all as fans right now. At least we're not down, but we are back and forth like a yo-yo. So. Let's hope that, when this show comes out on Wednesday, that we take care of business against New England, and then we can put up a fight against Miami. I'd hate to be their first win in their stadium, but I'm realistic to understand who this team is right now. So it might be, and it is what it is. But I'm optimistic as long as we can scrape together some results and some points. And what's really making me the most optimistic is the youth. So be patient with the youth, guys. Understand that it's going to take the youth time, but when they figure it out, these kids have heart, they have energy, they're going to find a way.
Yeah, definitely. I love watching the young guys. The thing I turned over to Luke on Wednesday and told him about Taifi. He said, my favorite thing about Taifi is he runs like he's angry at the ground. And you don't get you don't get that passion really in any other sport except for soccer, because you have players like him that started when they were 12, 13 years old playing for the badge, and they're gifted and hard workers, and fortunate enough to be able to continue that up to being a professional. And it's one of the things that makes this game called the beautiful game. It's one of the few sports in the world that you get to see stuff like that. Just imagine if Taifi and Ellis and Gusky, are 3 of the starters for when we won our first MLS Cup. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you get a chance to if our teams are in any of the finals for any of these big MLS Next tournaments from the academies and we win, watch the passion the guys celebrate with. Like it's absolutely incredible. It's why high school football in Texas is so huge, or stuff like that. It's all the same thing. So it's really a you know amazing and awesome thing to watch and to be a part of and to witness. And my son dreams of being like Zach or being like Ellis. And going. I know Ellis and Zachariah went through a little bit differently, but going making the academy, making the MLS Next team, and going up like that. So I mean, he's only 4, but anytime we ask him what he wants to be, he says he wants to play for Orlando City. And he's constantly got a ball on his foot. So we'll see. But even without him, it's an awesome thing to see. And they've got the talent, they've got high ceilings, and it's about putting in the work and about the staff giving them the time that they need in matches and everything.
And on that note too, don't forget to check out OCB out. I mean, there's a great
Yeah.
opportunity for you guys to watch them. I know it's kind of tucked away in Kissimmee where it's a little bit harder for people to get kind of over there. But again, if you're a season ticket holder, it's free. If you're not, it's $10. It's an intimate environment, so you are really close to the players. You can really hear everything that you want to hear that's going on the field. You get to meet a lot of these kids' parents. So if you sit in the right spots or the right sections, you'll see them. You'll see Orlando City players show up. I know John and I were at the last home game, and you saw Iago and Tiago, Justin Ellis, all these other guys had shown up. Ricardo goes to a lot of the games, if not all of them as well. The coaching staff normally shows up for the first team to those games. So you see a lot of people there, and they all take a very concerted effort in looking into the young players and kind of how they're doing and what they're doing, and they get really into the games too. I can't tell you how many times I saw like Perlman or Ricardo kind of put their hands over their face or cheer or give a big ooh when they just missed the ball. Like they're just as into it as the rest of us are.
Yeah.
So they really are looking at our talent and our youth and looking to see how they can kind of grow and expand. So
Definitely. I mean, it was cool. The last match we were at, because Iago and Tiago just happened to sit right behind us, and they were with Pedro Leal's parents, I believe.
yeah.
And some of his friends or family or whoever. So they're behind us. Obviously, I had no idea what they were saying because they were speaking in Portuguese. But it was cool to see. You could tell, kind of who was talking behind you, and it was cool to see how invested, especially Iago, because he's got a very deep voice, as you could imagine. How invested he was in the match.
Yeah.
And you could tell he was talking about the match because even though I don't understand Portuguese, you can I get bits and pieces of word are very close to Spanish, and I don't know Spanish either, but contextually I can figure out kind of the subject they're talking about.
Sure.
And, it was really cool. It was really cool when Leal scored the goal and they all went crazy behind us. That was really cool. And if, you guys are needing your fix for the next 2 months during the break, OCB does continue to play. They have, I believe, 4 or 5 home matches during that stretch.
Yeah.
They don't take time off. So, it's a good night out. It's cheap. Like you said, if you have season tickets, they're free. You just have to ask for them. Or if you don't have season tickets, they're $10, $15, something like that.
Also,
Parking's
ask a
free.
season ticket member, too, because if they're not going to go, just like give them to send you tickets or something like that. I mean, like don't let them.
And they can, at
don't let
this
them go to
time, they
waste.
can do that.
yeah. Don't let them go to waste because we just got our season ticket surveys. They just gave us the sort of like midway point survey, and one of the big things I said in my survey is don't stop giving us free OCB tickets. I think we need to convince more people to go out there and watch OCB because those stands can be a lot fuller than they are. And again, also during the break, when the team's off, you have a good chance of seeing some of the young first team guys play down. So you might see a Taifi, a Sajarin, we've seen Caraballo a bunch this season, but maybe even Ellis, if he wants to get some more minutes during the break and doesn't want to maybe take a break, you could see him go play down and things like that. Pedro Leal, who we've been banging the drum for, somebody you want to watch. Nacho Gomez, if he doesn't get his contract in the summer, he's going to be playing down with them. So these are all opportunities for you guys to go check them out, and it's a great environment, and I can't wait to see what Osceola does, because I know the stadium is a part of the rebuild that they want to do there. So I'm very curious to see kind of what they do to that stadium and what that complex looks like, because I'd love for them to make like a slightly smaller complex, but make it more of a soccer field, because right now it's obviously an old baseball stadium that they retrofitted or whatever. But I'd love to see it as like a proper small football pitch, something that can maybe hold like 10,000 people max, maybe a little bit smaller than that, like 8,000 people max.
Yeah.
It'd be a great place for obviously OCB to play, but even like the U19 Academy kids or something like that. Or if you wanted to host tournaments like they do down in IMG and stuff, it'd be cool if you had enough fields to go do that. And then that could be like the field for the finals or whatever it is, right? It'd be really cool for them to put together. But I'd be curious to see kind of what the plans are for Osceola Heritage, because right now, if you've been down there, it's very pieced together. There's not a lot of continuity between a lot of things. There's some work to be done to get that all at the same level. So, but different conversation for a different day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look for them to make the field, 8,000 would be a stretch to me. Even I'd say 5.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure like what size stadium they'd be looking for, but I don't think they need, because right now it's a lot of levels up. So maybe it's just like one level all the way around, but just finished off nicely and like covered or something. Because I'd love to also be on the bench side if I could, because I'd love to hear what the coaches are saying to the kids and sort of what that looks like or whatever, or like even being on the ends, because right now I'm a South Ender. Obviously you guys know John's in the wall, so like I'm used to that vantage point, so it's weird not being able to have that vantage point for OCB games. So not that I'm complaining about being like at the midway line or anything, but it is weird for me because I'm so used to being behind a goal or whatnot. But it'd be interesting to see kind of how they finish that off and what they do with that space.
Definitely. I mean, it's funny you say that, because at OCB matches, it's not weird for me. But then we go to like one of the friendlies or something and sit near the midline, and I'm like, why am I turning my neck so much when I'm right there and everything? But at the OCB matches, for whatever reason, it's just, it's maybe the differentiation between the two. But they're awesome matches to go to if you love the sport and like watching high level football, high level soccer. For cheap, and it's just enjoyable. It doesn't have all the dramatics and thematic stuff that the senior team has at the stadium and everything. It's just pure soccer. It's a place to go. I mean, in fact, I took 2 years ago now, took one of my friend Tom, David Valentin's friend Tom as well, to a match. He was here for the Orlando City match. Next day OCB played. He loved it. He's like, dude, I could sit here all day, drink a beer match, and just watch this level all day. It almost seemed like he enjoyed that more than he enjoyed the Orlando City match, because it's just so pure in what it is. Yeah. So it's a fun time. I'm planning on making a couple. At least a couple during the break, because I don't know what I'm going to do with it being June and July and not being able to go see Orlando City. It's going to be such a change, first time in 10 years since I've not been able to do that. And even next year, I'm like, what am I going to do in June and July? Like, there's nothing going on here. It's too hot to do anything else.
Right.
So, but good show tonight, David. Appreciate you joining me.
Anytime.
We're here every Wednesday. Try to release it every Wednesday except for last Wednesday. I don't know if you noticed it or not, David, but I scheduled it on Tuesday. So, we recorded it Monday night, scheduled it on Tuesday to come out Wednesday at like 9 a.m. I'm in bed Wednesday night looking and go on just to see how the video's doing, and stuff, and no video. So then I'm like scurrying, like, what happened?
Right.
And, so it went up a little late, but generally it's Wednesday morning we get it up. Thank you for everybody that will watch this. Hopefully we get the win against New England to advance in the U.S. Open Cup. Be amazing to make the quarterfinals. Be what, 3 wins at that point away from a trophy. And 1 win away from potentially our whole season being, doing a 180. Because I really think if we get past Columbus, it's ours to take home. But with that being said, thank you to everybody that'll watch and listen. As always, if you have any any comments, questions, want to join, you don't even have to join the whole time. If you just want to join for a brief conversation about a specific topic, we'll be on. If you want David to be on instead of Luke, or instead of me, or whatever, let us know. And we'll facilitate it. And you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to be on the whole show. Don't have to show your face. Just have to have your voice so we can communicate with you. If you do have anything to add, leave the comments on the video or on the audio, or DM us on our socials. So with that being said, hope everybody has a good Wednesday, and especially a good Wednesday evening with us hopefully taking home the win. As always, vamos.